Have you ever picked up something that you just couldn't put back down? Now, I'm not talking about a bad habit or, a really catchy song. I want you to actually imagine encountering something entirely mundane, like a completely regular object or an everyday location that suddenly carries this heavy, inescapable, and utterly unexplainable physical weight. It's a sensation that totally defies logic, and it kind of just pulls you into something much darker.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right into the mechanics of modern internet mysteries and really look at exactly how they construct this deep, lingering sense of dread. We'll be deconstructing something known as midnight static to understand how these narratives use highly specific sensory details to completely trap their audience. We are going to look at the structural DNA of the stories that literally keep people awake at night, exploring how they blur the line between digital folklore and our actual physical reality.
Section 1. The weight of the uncanny. A physical presence.
So, let's start with our core framework, a concept called midnight static. And no, we aren't just talking about literal static on an old TV screen. This represents the conceptual glitches in our reality, those dark corners of the internet where hidden, really heavy truths reside. It's basically the overarching fabric of these unsettling, uncanny encounters that leave you with way more questions than answers. When we talk about midnight static, we're talking about that permanent hum of the unexplained in our modern world. Now, here's the absolutely crucial point. These stories center on a physical object, or even a specific location, that seems to carry a weight far beyond its size. This is for sure what elevates these narratives way beyond your typical campfire ghost tales. They anchor the fear in something you can theoretically reach out and touch. They make you feel the physical burden of the mystery, transforming what should be a passive listening experience into a heavy, really visceral reaction.
Section 2. Case File. Room 1313. Hour of the Unseen.
Okay, picture this. The atmospheric trap in this story is set with just incredible precision. First, you are walking down a totally familiar hotel hallway. It's 3 a.m., it's a space you've walked through a dozen times before. Then, the atmosphere dramatically shifts. The air thickens with a distinct metallic smell, specifically ozone and old copper. It's that exact same heavy atmosphere you might find in stories about the forest trail that doesn't exist on maps, or when an elevator opens on a floor that just wasn't real. And finally, room 1313 appears right where it wasn't before, a room that literally did not exist when you checked in at noon.
The stakes here, they're entirely physical. Stepping through that newly materialized door basically guarantees a physical encounter with the uncanny. The source material describes people who claim to have entered this impossibly old room only to hear a rhythmic tapping. And the scary part? It starts from behind the walls, or, terrifyingly, from inside the furniture itself. Choosing to open that door transforms a kind of spooky hallway into an unavoidable physical confrontation with the impossible.
Section 3. Case File. The Last Fare. A mobile encounter.
Let's look at another one. In this late-night taxi ride, the structure is strikingly similar. At 2 a.m., a driver pulls over to pick up a passenger who is completely silent, but they're lugging this massive old-fashioned suitcase. They eventually arrive at an incredibly eerie destination, an abandoned school that supposedly has just one active classroom. The driver turns around to help with the bag, and boom, the passenger has completely vanished into thin air. All they leave behind is an empty, wide-open suitcase in the back seat.
Now, I really want you to notice the identical sensory triggers between these two encounters. It's crazy. In the hotel, we have the smell of ozone and old copper, followed by a rhythmic tapping behind the walls. In the taxi, that massive suitcase smells exactly the same, like ozone and old copper. And after the passenger vanishes, a rhythmic tapping starts coming from inside the trunk of the driver's own car. These shared elements show exactly how authors use the same sensory details to build dread in completely different settings.
So what are we really dealing with here? Well, we're dealing with unexplainable physical phenomena. The impossible disappearances, the phantom rooms, the rhythmic tapping. These physical glitches perfectly mirror the viral, unexplainable digital media we consume every single day. It is exactly like those eerie pieces of CCTV footage that police couldn't explain. These physical encounters are designed to mimic the unexplainable artifacts of our modern reality, perfectly blurring the line between what happens in the physical world and what we see scrolling on our digital screens.
Section 4. The Burden of Knowledge. The Psychological Toll.
You see, this heavy burden translates perfectly across different realms.
a mysterious physical object, an abandoned school, or Room 1313 carries the exact same psychological weight as the total shock of opening a partner's hidden phone, stumbling upon a haunted website that nobody should ever visit, or the chilling realization that your online friend wasn't actually human. The heavy dread translates seamlessly from a physical space directly into the dark secrets we keep on our digital devices.
And this phenomenon is incredibly widespread across internet culture. We see this exact same psychological weight in our true crime and mystery obsessions. Think about the audio recordings left by serial killers, TikTok accounts that mysteriously predict deaths, the creepiest 911 calls ever recorded, the unexpected phone call that somehow solved a cold case, or even deep dives into emotional Reddit drama. All of these carry that heavy burden of truth. They are all things we let into our lives without realizing it. And once we consume them, we have to carry their weight.
Which brings us to the central thesis of our explainer today. Sometimes the burden isn't actually what's inside the room, it's the knowledge of what's been left behind in the midnight static of our reality. Once you notice the glitches in our world, once you see Room 1313 or looked inside that empty, impossibly heavy suitcase, you simply can't unsee them. You carry the permanent, heavy burden of that knowledge forever.
So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. What heavy burden are you carrying without realizing it right now? And which door will you choose to open when the clock strikes 3? As you go about your day, pay a little extra attention to the digital secrets you consume and the physical spaces you occupy. Because honestly, you never know when the air might suddenly start to smell just a little bit like ozone and old copper. Stay curious, stay safe, and thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.